Consciousness might not be real. The voice in your head, the feeling that you exist, the sense that you are in control right now, all of it could be a carefully constructed illusion. This is not science fiction. This is not philosophy alone. This idea is coming from real experiments, real data, and some of the most advanced research on the human brain. And the deeper scientists look, the more unsettling the answer becomes, because the truth is this: the you that feels so clear and so obvious might not actually exist in the way you believe. Right now, it feels like there is a center inside your mind, a place where decisions are made, a place where thoughts appear, a place where you observe the world. It feels like everything comes together into one unified experience, but science is starting to break that idea apart. In this video, you will learn why consciousness might not be what it seems. You will see how your brain could be generating a false sense of self. You will discover experiments that suggest your decisions happen before you are even aware of them. And by the end, you will face a question that changes everything. If consciousness is not real in the way we think, then what is actually running your mind? To understand this, we need to start with what most people believe consciousness is. People think of consciousness as awareness, the feeling of being alive, the inner voice that talks silently in your head, the sense that you are experiencing the world from the inside. It feels continuous, it feels stable, it feels like the same you that existed yesterday and will exist tomorrow. This feeling is so strong that almost nobody questions it. You wake up, you think, you decide, you act, it all feels connected, like one smooth flow controlled by a single self. But here is something most people never realize. There is no place in your brain where this self actually exists. Scientists have searched for it, they have scanned the brain, they have mapped neural activity, they have studied patients with brain damage in rare conditions, and they keep finding the same thing. There is no central control room. There is no single point where everything comes together. Instead, your brain is made of many separate systems. Each one handles different tasks: vision, memory, emotions, language, movement. All of these systems work at the same time, often without direct coordination. And yet somehow, you experience all of this as one unified reality. That is the first crack in the illusion. Because if your brain is divided into many parts, why does it feel like a single continuous self? The answer might be more disturbing than you expect. Your brain could be creating that feeling after everything else has already happened. In other words, the sense of you might not be the cause of your thoughts and actions. It might be the result. Think about that carefully. It feels like you are the one thinking your thoughts. It feels like you are the one making choices. But what if your brain makes those decisions first and then creates the feeling that you chose them? This is exactly what some experiments suggest. Researchers have observed brain activity that predicts a decision seconds before a person becomes aware of it. That means the brain has already decided before the conscious mind catches up. So where does that leave the you that feels in control? It starts to look less like a leader and more like a storyteller, a system that explains actions after they happen, a narrator, not the author. And this is where things begin to get even stranger. Because your brain is not just reacting to reality. It is actively constructing it. Everything you see, hear, and feel is processed and interpreted. Your brain fills in gaps. It predicts what should be there. It builds a model of the world based on limited information. What you experience is not raw reality. It is a version of reality created inside your mind that includes your sense of self. The feeling that you are a single stable identity might be part of that construction. A useful illusion, a way for the brain to organize information and maintain control over the body, but not something that exists as a fixed independent entity. This idea is not widely understood. It goes against instinct. It challenges one of the deepest beliefs people hold, the belief that there is a someone inside, a thinker behind the thoughts, a controller behind the actions. Science is starting to question that belief. And the more evidence appears, the more it suggests something radical. You might not be a single unified self. You might be a process, a constantly changing system, a story your brain is telling itself in real time. And if that is true, then everything changes. Because if consciousness is not what it seems, then control, identity, and even free will start to look very different. So here is a question that will guide this entire video. If the self is an illusion, then who or what is actually in charge? By the end of this video, you will see how deep this question goes and why the answer might completely reshape how you understand your own mind. Welcome to the channel. If you are ready to explore ideas that challenge reality itself, make sure to subscribe and stay with this video until the end. There is no single you inside your brain. That feeling of being one person, one voice, one mind might be a carefully built illusion. It feels solid, it feels continuous, it feels real, but deep inside your brain, something very different is happening. In this video, you will discover why science says your mind is not one unified system. You will learn how different parts of your brain operate independently. You will see real experiments where one brain behaves like two separate minds, and by the end you will understand why the self you trust might only appear after everything else is already done. This matters more than it sounds, because if there is no single you in control, then your thoughts, your decisions, and your identity may not belong to one central self at all. Right now, it feels like everything in your mind is connected. You see something, you think about it, you decide, you act, it feels smooth, it feels unified, it feels like one system working together under your control. But that feeling is misleading. Your brain is not a single system. It is a network of separate processes. Each part handles its own job, each part works at the same time, and many of these parts do not directly communicate with each other in the way you expect. There is no central command room. There is no master controller sitting at the center of your mind. Scientists have searched for it for decades. They have scanned the brain in extreme detail. They have mapped regions responsible for vision, language, movement, memory, and emotion. They have tracked how signals move and how decisions form, and they keep finding the same pattern. Different areas activate at different times. Different systems compete, cooperate, and sometimes even conflict. But none of them act as the final authority. That is the first strange truth. There is no single place where you exist. Instead, there are many processes working together, each unaware of the full picture, and yet somehow you feel like one person. That feeling is not built into the structure of the brain. It is something your brain creates. To understand how strange this is, scientists studied one of the most unusual conditions in neuroscience. It is called a split brain condition. In some rare medical cases, doctors had to cut the connection between the two halves of the brain. This connection is known as the corpus callosum. It allows the left and right hemispheres to communicate. When that connection is removed, something shocking happens. The two halves of the brain begin to act independently. In one famous set of experiments, a person was shown different images in each eye. One side of the brain saw one image, the other side saw something else. When asked what they saw, the person would answer based on only one side, but at the same time, their other hand could respond differently. One hand could point to an object that the other side of the brain recognized, even though the person could not explain why. It was as if two separate awareness systems existed in the same body. Two streams of perception, two sets of responses, two different minds operating at once. And here is the part that most people never hear about. The person still felt like one unified self. Even with two independent systems, the brain tried to maintain a single story. When one side acted without explanation, the other side would invent a reason. Not because it was lying, but because it needed to make sense of what happened. This reveals something powerful. Your brain does not just process information. It explains it. It builds a narrative that feels consistent and unified, even when the underlying processes are not. The sense of being one person is not coming from a single source. It is being constructed moment by moment. After the fact, that means your thoughts and actions might not start from a central you. Instead, they emerge from many different systems, and then your brain stitches them together into a single experience. This stitching process is so smooth that you never notice it. It feels instant, it feels natural, it feels real, but it is a reconstruction, a simplified version of something far more complex. And this creates a deep illusion. You feel like a single observer inside your mind, a consistent identity that stays the same over time. But in reality, your brain is constantly changing. Different systems become active, different networks take control. Different processes influence your behavior. There is no fixed center, there is no permanent self, there is only activity. And then after that activity, your brain creates the feeling that it all came from one place. That feeling is your sense of self. This idea challenges everything people assume about their own mind, because it means your identity is not a solid object. It is a dynamic process. It is not something you are. It is something your brain generates, and it does this for a reason. A unified sense of self helps organize behavior. It helps maintain stability. It allows you to function in a complex world without confusion. Without this illusion, your experience could feel fragmented and chaotic. So your brain creates a simple story. One mind, one voice, one self, even when the reality underneath is far more divided. This is why the illusion is so convincing. It is not random, it is highly refined, it is built to feel real, but once you see the cracks, it becomes hard to ignore. There is no single place in your brain where all of you exists. There is no hidden observer watching everything from the center. There's only a system of interacting parts, constantly working, constantly changing, constantly constructing the experience. See, you call me, and that leads to a deeper question. If your brain is doing all of this behind the scenes, then when exactly does the feeling of you appear? Is it present from the start, or is it added later as a final layer? The answer will take this idea even further. Welcome to the channel. If you want to explore the hidden truths of the mind and reality, make sure to subscribe and stay with this video until the end. Your brain decides before you even know it. That sounds impossible. It feels wrong. Every choice feels deliberate. Every action feels like it begins with a clear moment of decision. But when scientists started measuring the brain with precise tools, they found something deeply unsettling. The signal for decision appears before the awareness of making it. In controlled experiments, people were asked to press a button whenever they felt the urge. Nothing complex, no pressure, just a simple, spontaneous choice. At the same time, their brain activity was being recorded. The result was unexpected. A specific pattern in the brain appeared several hundred milliseconds before the person reported deciding to act. The brain had already begun the process. The action was already in motion. Awareness came later. This delay is small, less than a second, but it changes everything because it suggests that the feeling of deciding is not the start of the process. It is a late arrival. Your brain initiates, your mind observes. More advanced studies push this even further. Using brain scans and machine learning, researchers could predict a person's choice several seconds before the person became aware of it, not after, before. That means your brain is preparing actions long before you feel in control. This creates a strange situation. You feel like the author of your decisions, but the evidence shows that the process begins without your conscious input. So here does that leave the you that feels responsible? It starts to look less like a controller and more like an interpreter. Your brain is constantly generating thoughts, impulses, and actions. These come from deep neural systems that operate outside awareness. They process past experiences, emotions, patterns, and predictions. Then after these processes produce an outcome, consciousness steps in, it explains, it creates a story that makes the action feel intentional. This is known as post hoc construction. The brain builds a narrative after the event to maintain a sense of control and continuity. There are experiments that reveal this clearly. In some cases, people are made to perform actions without knowing why. Their brain is influenced in subtle ways. When asked to explain their behavior, they confidently give reasons that are completely false. They believe their explanation. The brain fills the gap. It protects the illusion of a conscious self in control. Even more surprising, damage to certain brain areas can cause people to act without awareness, yet still justify those actions as if they were planned. The explanation feels real. The sense of ownership remains. This shows that the feeling of choosing is not always connected to the actual cause of the choice. It is a layer added on top, like a narrator describing a story that has already been written. And this narrator is convincing. It creates a seamless experience. It connects past, present, and future into one continuous line. It makes you feel like the same person making decisions over time. But underneath, the system is far more complex. Multiple processes compete, signals rise and fall. Decisions emerge from networks, not from a single point. And then once the outcome is clear, consciousness steps in and says, I did this. That statement feels true, it feels immediate, it feels undeniable, but it might. That not be the origin, it might be the explanation, a final layer added to a process that started long before you became aware of it. And if that is true, then the sense of control you trust might be more fragile than it seems. Because the real question is no longer how you make decisions. The real question is why you believe you made them at all. You feel like the same person you were years ago, the same name, the same identity, the same inner voice that has always been there. But almost everything about you has changed. Your body is different, your brain has rewired itself thousands of times, your beliefs have shifted, your memories have faded, mixed and evolved, even your personality has adjusted with experience. And yet, it still feels continuous. It feels like a single thread running through your entire life. This is where the illusion becomes even deeper because that continuity is not stored anywhere as a fixed thing. It is being created. Your brain is constantly building a narrative, a story that connects your past, your present, and your expectations of the future. Without this story, your experiences would feel disconnected and chaotic, so the brain fills the gaps, It smooths over contradictions, it edits details, it rearranges events to make sense, and most of this happens without awareness. Memory is not a recording. It is not stored like a video that can be played back exactly as it happened. Every time you recall something, your brain reconstructs it. It pulls fragments from different places and assembles them into a coherent scene. During this process, details can change. New information can be added. Old parts can be lost. Emotional tones can shift. Over time, the memory becomes less about what actually happened and more about the story your brain has built around it. There are cases where people clearly remember events that never occurred. They see and describe them with confidence, with emotion, with certainty. But when tested, those memories have no basis in reality. The brain created them not as a mistake, but as a way to maintain a stable identity. Because a consistent story is more important than perfect accuracy. Your sense of self depends on this stability. Without it, you would not feel like a continuous person moving through time. You would feel like separate moments with no connection. So your brain acts like a storyteller. It takes everything you experience and turns it into a narrative, a beginning, a middle, a direction. You become the main character in that story. But here is the strange part. The story is always being edited. Every new experience updates it. Every new memory reshapes it. Every new decision changes the direction. There is no final version. There is no fixed you behind it. There is only the current version of the story. And that story feels real because it is all you have ever known. Even your personality follows this pattern. Traits that feel permanent are actually flexible. Under different conditions, people behave in ways that contradict their own self-image. The brain then adjusts the narrative to explain it. I am this kind of person. That statement feels solid, but it is often built after the behavior, not before. The brain observes what you do, then updates the story to match. This creates the illusion of a stable identity. But underneath it is constantly shifting. Even your sense of purpose, your goals, your fears, all of them are woven into this ongoing narrative. And because the process is continuous, you never notice the changes happening. It feels like one smooth line, one life, one self. But in reality, it is more like a sequence of updates, a story being rewritten in real time. Each moment adding a new layer, each memory adjusting the past, each thought shaping the next version of who you believe you are. And if the self is a story, then the question becomes more unsettling. Who is writing it? And how much of that story is actually under your control? If consciousness is not what it seems, then the idea of control begins to fall apart. Every choice feels personal. Every decision feels owned. You think, you decide, you act. That is the story. But the evidence suggests something colder, something more mechanical. Your brain runs, processes, signals move, patterns compete, outcomes emerge, and only after that the feeling of choice appears. This raises a difficult possibility. Free will might not work the way it feels. The sense of choosing could be a surface effect, a final layer placed on top of deeper activity that you never see. The real drivers of behavior may exist below awareness, shaped by biology, past experience, and hidden computations. This does not mean actions are random. It means they may be determined by systems that operate outside conscious control. Every thought has a cause. Every decision has a chain behind it. That chain stretches into genetics, environment, memory, and unconscious processing. And none of that feels visible. You only feel the end result. This idea changes how responsibility is understood. If actions come from processes you do not fully control, then blame and credit become more complex. A person acts based on brain states they did not design. Emotions rise without permission. Impulses appear without warning, yet society depends on the idea that people are in control. Rules, laws, and judgments are built on that belief, but neuroscience is starting to blur that line. There are cases where damage to specific parts of the brain changes behavior in extreme ways. People with certain tumors or injuries have shown sudden aggression, loss of impulse control, or drastic personality shifts when physical problem is treated, the behavior can disappear. This reveals something unsettling. A small change in the brain can alter decisions, values, and actions. The person changes because the system changes. This suggests that behavior is tightly linked to physical processes, not just influenced by them, but driven by them. And this leads to another layer of tension. Human experience feels rich and meaningful. Thoughts feel deep. Emotions feel powerful. The sense of self feels unique. But underneath, it may all be generated by patterns of electrical activity. Neurons fire, signals pass, networks activate. From this, the entire experience of being human emerges. That does not make it less real, but it makes it less mysterious in one sense and more unsettling in another, because it means the mind might operate like a system, complex but still governed by rules, predictable in ways that are only beginning to be understood. This challenges the idea of being a fully independent agent. It suggests that the boundary between choice and process is not clear, and once that boundary starts to fade, deeper questions begin to rise. If your thoughts are produced by brain activity, then where do you fit into that process? If your identity is shaped by constant updates, then what remains stable? If your decisions begin before awareness, then what role does consciousness actually play? These questions move beyond science into philosophy. They touch on the nature of reality itself, because your entire experience of the world is filtered through your mind. If that mind is constructing reality, then the world you know is deeply tied to how your brain operates. And if the sense of self is part of that construction, then the observer and the experience are both shaped by the same system. This creates a strange loop. You are trying to understand your own mind using the very proc. That creates the illusion of understanding. And the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to separate what is real from what is constructed, which leads to a final tension that cannot be ignored. If consciousness is not the source of control and the self is not a fixed entity, then something else must be holding this entire experience together. So the answer is not as simple as consciousness is fake. It is something more subtle, more unsettling. Consciousness may not be what it feels like, but that does not mean it is meaningless. It means it is misunderstood. The self you trust might not be a solid thing, and it might not exist as a single center inside your brain. Instead, it could be an emergent illusion, a pattern that appears when billions of neurons interact, a result, not a source. But even if it is an illusion, it is the most powerful one you will ever experience, because it defines everything. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every decision you believe you make. All of it flows through this constructed sense of self. It shapes your reality. It gives meaning to your life. It connects your past to your future. Without it, nothing would feel coherent. So the illusion is not a flaw. It is a function. Your brain builds a version of you to hold everything together. A story that feels continuous. A voice that feels in control. A presence that feels real. And that story becomes your world. That is the real shift. The question is no longer whether consciousness is real or fake. The question is how it is built and why it feels so convincing. Because once you see that your mind is constructing your experience, everything starts to look different. Reality is no longer something you simply observe. It is something your brain actively creates, and that leads to one final thought. If your entire sense of self is part of that construction, then everything you have ever known, every moment you have lived, every truth you believe has been filtered through a system designed to make it feel real. That means the world you experience is not just out there. It is also being built right now inside your mind. If this changed the way you think, leave a like. And if you want to explore more ideas that challenge reality itself, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next video.